Welcome to Fintech Daydreaming, the podcast that dives into the world of banking technologies and the ever-changing landscape of fintech companies. We bring you real-life examples from global and local thought leaders, as well as experts working within the financial industry, and seek out the best stories from the front lines of financial services innovation, where dreams of industry pioneers meet reality. Hosted by Pål and Ville. This is Fintech Daydreaming.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Nordic Fintech Highlights, featured by, of course, Fintech Daydreaming and Helsinki Fintech Farm. My name is Ville. I will be your host and guide for this brief episode that we're going to be recording today due to time constraints, but that's not going to stop us from having interesting discussions for the duration. As always, I'm of course joined by Pål and Janne, and we tend to talk about the weather and when we're recording, but let's skip all that. So Pål, how are you?
No, we have made a conscious decision and agreed that as for this season of Fintech Daydreaming and Nordic Fintech Highlights, we will not be discussing the weather because that's our go-to and it's been banned. How am I? I am all Gucci. As you know, last weekend we picked up a puppy. We've got a cute little bundle of fur, which is the most adorable, cute thing on this planet. I never thought that I would get to a point where I thought it was adorable to have my nose nibbled by what seems to be the closest equivalent to a land-moving piranha. But apart from that, it was wonderful, adorable, cute, cuddly. I've run out of words. So yes, I'm very happy. Nothing to do with fintech, but very happy.
No. It looks like a really nice fluffy toy from the pictures and video that you've sent me. So yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from with that. But hey, Janne, do you have any new pets to talk about today?
No, I just have a very old pet. So yeah, my dog is showing more and more some kind of characteristics of dementia. So she's getting even more aware of her majesticity. So I try to cooperate with that and please her and follow the instructions, but it's sometimes pretty difficult. All
right, good. That's it with the updates on the animal front. I think we'll see where we land, but we'll definitely now need to focus on the fintech highlights because the time is running short, as we said. But okay, let's start going through the agenda here. So, Jan, as always, we start with what's the overall landscape looking like or looked like in February. So maybe give a few notes on those.
Yes, sure. So yeah, as remember, January was a bit more quiet, but yeah, now it's again a bit more speeding up. We saw a lot of stuff happening, or not a lot of stuff, but still stuff happening in every category. Especially in January, a lot of things in the funding side, and not so surprisingly, it was especially around AI companies. So financial planning seems to be something that everyone is doing, AI native, AI driven, AI focused. So clearly there are a lot of, frustrated guys in their garages setting up new AI based accounting, financial planning, etc. companies. But that being said, there are also things that are happening on the incumbent side. So for instance, Basware company from the 80s is also launching AI agents. So it's not only like the startups who are playing with AI, definitely. And then also, the partnership side, as usual, a lot of things around payments and infrastructure there, and then also a few transactions. But pretty good start for the year now as we have finished the February.
Yeah, it's interesting to notice that I personally noticed a lot of, let's say, interesting movements in the AI space. And while that is a fairly obvious thing to say for the past 2 years, I truly feel that this feels a little different. A lot of the discussions around AI agents have been moving forward significantly. And even in my friend circle, a lot of people are now experimenting with agents, with OpenClaw and all this fun stuff. And it's quite amazing what people are able to do with it. It's still far away from being able to use it for anything real like banking, but still, I mean, there's a really interesting movement happening in this space with these coding tools and agent tools. But we'll see how long it takes for this to impact the real economy. But at least the signs are definitely there. So Paul, have you built your own AI agent yet?
I've been doing an awful lot with AI. You know that I'm a avid fan of AI, but a little bit like you, I'm actually starting to see the chasm between the believers and the non-believers getting wider. And a little bit like we've had in the past, you do get early adopters, you do get people who believe there's a bubble, the bubble is going to burst. Technology bubbles do burst, but I think this time the bubble is slightly different. I don't think the bubble is a misconception of the technology like we've had in the past, where it's almost been a technology looking for a problem. I don't think we've quite got that this time. This time it's more of a funding and commercial issue that's going on around, if we're talking about a bubble associated with AI. But it's interesting when, particularly working in a highly regulated industry that we are, the number of people that still believe that this whole area of AI, generative AI, is still very sci-fi and futuristic and don't believe in it and everything else. And the advancements that we're seeing is, I think, almost scary, but scary in a good way. And we're seeing almost on a daily basis. I'm playing an awful lot with AI, and the advancements that we're seeing, the capabilities that we're seeing it's shocking to me, but in a good way. And I'm really enjoying where this is going. And particularly in the roles that we have got, Ville, where I admit we sit on different sides of the table, we're still very, very focused on similar things, be that payments, emerging technologies, different business models, the growth of embedded finance, etc. I really do think that we are going to see an explosion of the use of AI and the experimentation of generative AI here and agents. And one interesting discussion I got involved in actually end of last week was around modernization of legacy systems and the shift in what banks traditionally look at as channels. We've always talked about multi-channel strategy, the ability to start in one channel, end in another channel, and those sort of things. I think the whole notion of channels is about to get completely annihilated, particularly when we start talking about, well, actually, the next future generation of users is going to be agents. And those agents are going to want to have completely different engagement models and different things that it will look at for identifying whether this is a good or bad service. And those things are going to have to be delivered by agents. Banking is going to become an agent-to-agent communication channel in the future. And I think this is, it's exciting.
Indeed. And as an example, a practical example, I was kind of tinkering with one of my friends over the weekend with OpenClaw. We had a use case idea, basically, that are you able to create a chatbot that is able to recommend you wines based on reviews and then availability of said wine in the Finnish monopoly stores, basically, Alkos. And before we knew it, we were kind of looking into, okay, so how can we get this information out of APIs existing on existing websites? The agent just went and basically reverse engineered all the APIs from existing websites, and now it's available as a chatbot. So basically you're saying that I'm going to spend this weekend in this village in Finland, give me recommendations on the wine, and then it will say, get this one from this specific place because the inventory is there, and don't go here, and it will just do all that. All of that happened through just having a chat with an agent, and this is the future. Clearly, we quite quickly run into the point of okay, let's figure out how to make payments with this, but that's where we stop, because again, you don't want to give payment privileges for these agents quite yet. Exciting times nonetheless. I do believe that it's this kind of tinkering that's increasing now, and people getting stuff done in very interesting ways. That's going to kind of grow the next generation of talent also that are able to work with these AI agents more effectively. Let's see how that chasm will deepen. But wow, that was a rabbit hole. Should we get out of it?
No, actually not. Just very quickly, another one very recently. I mean, we've seen one element where I think we've seen great proof of this explosion is when one of the large vendors made an announcement around being able to analyze COBOL code and how it actually impacted a number of the big tech companies' share prices, right? So I think it's really exciting stuff.
Oh yeah, indeed. Yeah, I saw that, and I hold some stocks that lost value, so not good. Okay, but good. Hey,
We're
Janne.
not allowed to mention the company, right?
No. Everybody knows. Anyway, Janne, before we get going with the news, do you have a joke for the?
Absolutely, yes.
Let's get to it then.
So, a father is asked by his friend, "Has your son decided yet what he wants to do when he grows up?" "Yes," the father replied. "He wants to work in a bank's call center." "Well, that's a surprising choice. Dealing with angry customers all day sounds exhausting." "Oh, he's not worried about that. He thinks they only work and pick up the phone every second Tuesday."
Is this another AI agent use case? Anyway, apologies for that. We don't necessarily agree to these jokes, all of us, but it is what it is. But thank you for that, Janne. I hope you enjoyed it as little as I did. All right, good. Hey, let's move on. So should we go through the news articles that we picked this week? And why don't you start, Janne?
Yes. So there was a news article again about Lunar. We've been talking about that bank, I think, in several episodes in a row. But yeah, they entered a partnership with Wolt. So basically, Lunar is offering their paying customers free Wolt Plus subscription. And itself, this is no breaking news. For instance, Revolut has been doing the same for probably a couple of years already. So part of the subscription, you get some extra benefits from other partners. But what actually caught my eye and was interesting here is that through this partnership, Wolt starts to offer the business banking services of Lunar to Wolt's partners like the restaurants and the couriers. So again, we talked earlier about Lunar and how they raised funding to strengthen their offering and position in the SME segment, and now they are doing it through Wolt. And I think this is very cool example of actually go and take the business where the customers are. This is how things are done in the 2020s. Good example of marketing and if they want to take it further, I don't know what's the level at this point, but they could obviously do integrations where the Wolt's financial platform is actually then feeding the accounting and information like that, and it's actually integrated to Lunar, which would make life much easier. And that's a great example of embedded finance. So yeah, interesting stuff, I would say.
Absolutely. I can see so many parallels with many of the other platforms, including Uber, that have done similar things all around the world, and now it seems like it's landing to the Nordics. I'm going to be honest, I didn't have a chance to read this article before we started recording. So in which countries is this rolled out?
They didn't. If I remember right, they didn't tell exactly everything, but there was a mention that now the athletes started with Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, which is obviously the Lunar's home field. But then again, was there a bigger plan, because Wolt is obviously already quite a global network, and that's also what Lunar is aiming to do. But now there was a brief mention about Denmark, Norway, and Sweden in the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. And this has so many interesting points to it. So, for example, if you look at the structure of these independent entrepreneurs that Wolt uses as couriers, these are typically either part-time, people working part-time into this, or they are low income and they basically just do a lot of this stuff in order to kind of get by. Typically, people with immigrant backgrounds, for example, tend to work in this space. And that creates a very interesting environment for any financial institution to go, because it suddenly becomes financial inclusion. Basically, you need to ensure that all the necessary paperwork is basically in place for all these couriers in order to provide them with a bank account, for instance. So again, I'm interested to understand, what are the kind of limitations perhaps for these couriers that would be using Lunar services, maybe through the Wolt application, I don't know, but and what are the limitations? Again, are those going to be onboarded as full customers with full KYC? Is this going to be some kind of a lighter regime done for that? My guess is no, but a lot of interesting questions to answer in this customer group. Paul, did you have a chance to look deeper into this story?
I think this is a really interesting story, and like you mentioned, Ville, there's a lot of interesting parts to open up on this. I agree with you. I haven't quite understood from the announcement who will be doing the KYC and who will actually own the customer in this context, or the employee of Wolt or the drivers. I actually believe it's slightly different in each country, right? I think here in Finland now, the Wolt drivers are actually employed by Wolt. They're not independent contractors anymore. I could be slightly wrong there. I think there was a change.
Yeah, they took part of them in under some criteria, but most of them are still independent contractors.
Right. Yeah. But back to the bigger picture here. Absolutely, you're right, Janne. There is a lot of elements here that replicate what we've seen in the past. Absolutely, it's a fantastic example again of embedded finance and a financial institution looking at how they can embed themselves into customer journeys. You're right, Revolut has done something very similar in multiple areas, where you end up with the bank trying to build a super app, as we see across other parts of the world. Again, I'm not too sure whether the notion of a super app from a financial services perspective is really going to work in the Nordics or in Europe. Maybe it will. Maybe someone like Revolut or Lunar or someone else can actually manage to break the user centricity world, where particularly in the Nordics, people have a certain element of wanting to segregate what they're doing on their phone between different apps rather than having everything in one place. So I think the whole notion of super app probably won't work as well here as maybe in Asia Pacific. But the other element, like you mentioned, Ville, when Lunar is making their services available to the drivers, the Wolt drivers, that aligns very, very much to what Uber did when Uber made their banking, or their drivers have access to banking capabilities. And it's much wider than just potentially giving them a bank account, because the minute you start getting that relationship and you get closer to the drivers, the same as Uber did, you start having the ability to maybe offer them leasing on their vehicle, offering them insurance, offering them financing, a whole lot of other stuff. And like you said, if we're talking about immigrants, if we're talking about low-income people, it actually gives them a step towards financial security, financial stability, which actually works for everybody in that group. But it does then also shift back to who is taking the KYC responsibility. Is that sitting with Lunar? Is that sitting to a certain degree with Wolt in this case? But very interesting development, and yet again, a great example of the growth of embedded finance going forwards.
I think the conversion point is also quite interesting. Of course, Wolt supports other bank accounts. Obviously, you need to get paid even without this partnership. So there's going to be a selection of banks that you can have to support as a contractor for or being a driver for Wolt. But the experience has shown, or statistics are showing that when there is an embedded proposition in any platform, for example, opening a business account, for example, then it's a vast majority tend to choose that instead of getting a provider that is less smoothly integrated into the proposition. So I've seen numbers like 80% choosing to use the embedded selection instead of the traditional ones, for example. So this is going to be a very interesting thing to follow from a conversion standpoint as well. And as you mentioned, Uber has been pioneering in this space for a long time. I remember many years ago when Uber started rolling out the Uber Money concept in India, where it's also a market where there's a lot of cash usage, for example, and the drivers still need to be able to convert the cash into digital, and then embedding this almost like a wallet functionality into the driver's day-to-day life made it much easier for them to manage their cash flow, for example. So yeah, it's a well-established space, and but the first time we're seeing something like this happen in the Nordic at this scale. Anyway, good. But hey, time is ticking, so we need to move on. Paul, which one did you choose this week?
Yes, there was a lot of interesting news articles in the newsletter for the month of February. Struggled a little bit to find the one that I thought was most interesting, but in the end, I picked one, again, looking from a consumer perspective, and this is around Swedbank in Sweden, who are, again, having themselves in a little bit of hot water around AML sanctioning and AML capabilities. I had to do a little bit of digging around, and I'm not 100% sure if I managed to get all of the dots to line up here. So I have to be a little bit careful, but the actual news this time is that Swedbank is being investigated by the Swedish Financial Supervisory Authority around AML requirements. And this time it is focused on their customer due diligence capabilities from December 2023 to November 2025. This is on the back of an investigation that was done by the DOJ in the US around something that kicked off from Danske Bank, which ended in January 2026 around a scandal in the Baltics. So the Swedish authorities picked up after the back of that. But the thing that got me curious is I remember that back in 2020, Swedbank ended up being fined for deficiencies in AML control around Baltic operations of around the tune of about 4 billion Swedish krona. And I'm trying to see if all of these hang together, whether the DOJ investigation is connected to the penalty that Swedbank was fined in 2020, because the one in 2020 was around their Baltic operations. The DOJ is around the Baltic operations or a Baltic scandal. The Swedish Financial Supervisory Authority has said that the investigation that they're doing now is not related to the closing investigation that was done by the DOJ, and that they don't actually have any proof of wrongdoing. They're just investigating, in effect, saying we're checking that Swedbank's due diligence is as they expect it to be. Awful lot of different moving parts here. But I also think that it highlights a focus that we're going to see within inside of the EU of more and more investigations into AML and AML areas for banks going forwards. Just interesting that unfortunately Swedbank is the one that keeps getting hit over the head more recently, but you know, there's been other banks as well. But that was the news article I picked up on, and like I said, still doing a little bit of digging around here, trying to see if the dots line up, and they probably don't. So I don't want to start any conspiracy theories either.
Yeah, I can almost see you like, looking at a conspiracy board with like, the red strings going, and then you're kind of explaining on how everything is connected ultimately. But yeah, it's the story that we have heard so many times over the past years, which is that a Nordic bank is being penalized for AML and otherwise sanctions related activities. Seems like it's repeating quite often. That raises the question in my mind, is that is it just because the regulators are being more strict and they want to actually follow through with these cases in a more diligent way in the Nordics? Or is it really that the Nordic banks are so evil? I think the truth might not be completely black and white on that regard either, but it is good to see that there is clear litigation on these topics, so that we basically get the bad actors at least to somewhat bear responsibility of the actions that have been taken. Now, that being said, I'm always interested to see the kind of macro trends of these cases, considering the ongoing hype and growth, at least in discussions about these private digital currencies like stablecoins, which also mean that the criminal activity will also increasingly move onto those rails. So again, well, whether that's going to reduce the cases on the kind of traditional finance side of things, of these kind of breaches, remains to be seen. At least the statistics are showing significant growth in crime with stablecoins for obvious reasons. Janne, what do you think of this? Was this another deja vu once again, or did you learn something new out of this story?
Yeah, I think just generally the AML space is just, it doesn't really add up, like how much effort and money is put to prevent money laundering, and still it happens. And there actually was even a study. It was maybe University of Turku that AML functions and regulation and compliance causes actually more harm than it actually prevents money laundering. So yeah, it doesn't, just very, very tricky space.
Interesting point. So if we would remove all AML controls in the existing systems, which by the way would make things very, very cheap and very fast.
Yeah.
I still think that's a world where we don't want to be in, though. But did the study take this into account?
Yeah, hard to say. Like, people are still laundering money, even though all the controls. So
yeah, that is true. But again, the counterpoint always is that, okay, fine, but what is the alternative? Because the alternative obviously cannot be just get rid of all the controls.
yeah.
And people, you see this criticism many times about, AML is not working. It's causing massive investments in this space, which is all correct. And then it's only preventing like a small fraction of the crimes. But again, what is the alternative? And so far, I have not seen one. That's the kind of sad part of that reality.
But I think that's a slightly wrong way of looking upon it. We shouldn't have a black and white, should we do it, should we not do it? Because it goes across the board. AML is just one vertical in a whole number of different elements where criminal activity is happening. There's AML, there's KYC, there's everything else across the board, from cyber criminality and everything else. Bad guys will always be bad guys, and they're always going to try and find ways to navigate or circumvent the controls and the regulations. It's not a question of do we take them away or not. It's a question of can we find a way of staying one step ahead. The bad guys are moving into money mules and everything else. They're always going to find ways to try and get their money washed or their illegal activities hidden in one way or another. Back to our discussion of AI and generative AI and those capabilities, hopefully for once we're going to find a way of maybe getting a little bit ahead of them. One of the things that I find interesting in this article, or in this time, the AML sanctioning, is the fact that a common part of this, unfortunately, is that it's the Baltic states. Right. And I don't know whether that's pointed to something either, but the Baltic states came up in 2020. The Baltic states come up to the DOJ and the Danske Bank scenario where Swedbank was pulled in. So, one of the things that sometimes pops up is the geopolitical situation we're in at the moment, and how long has that actually been bubbling up?
Indeed. I think the countries which get more exposed to, for example, the sanctioned Russian population, of course, are getting more scrutiny, I would say, now in this world where we live in at the moment. That being said, I do want to raise one more final point, perhaps, on this article, which is the fact that you can, if you look at the financial crime prevention in general, whether that's AML or sanctions, whatever, there's two sides to that. There's the banks who are investing in these financial crime prevention capabilities and all the fancy AI tools and basically detecting illicit activities and trying to protect their customers and be compliant with for in this case, for example, with AML regulations. But the other side of that story is the enforcement. So when the private sector actors create what they call suspicious activity reports to public authorities or the supervisors, the volume of those reports is quite overwhelming, considering the resources of the officials to actually take enforcement activities towards any of those reports. So if it's the asymmetric resourcing situation that we have between the private sector and the public sector in this case, that is a cause of concern, at least for me personally, because again, the public authorities will always prioritize the bigger cases, for example. So again, you take a kind of a categorical decision and that we're going to enforce these cases, but we're going to leave these out. And then how much is then being kind of how much is slipping through the fingers, not because the banks are not detecting it, but just because the public authorities are not able to enforce. So yeah, we live in an interesting world, I would say. But on that note, we now seem to arrive at a full circle in this conversation because we started talking about AI agents and how everything is changing, or we feel like something new is happening in that space right now. And why we are coming to full circle is that because I chose the news article this week that talks about this exact topic. And the news that I picked was Finnish company Buzzware as is rolling out AI agents. So Buzzware, for those who might not know, is what they call themselves a global leader in invoice lifecycle management. That could mean anything, I guess. So the way I would put it is that they're like they're outsourcing partner for companies that want to have invoices going in and out managed in an efficient way. This, of course, for large corporations is a big function. And again, Buzzware provides platform software and services around invoice management for large corporates. This sounds like a very juicy target for AI, obviously, because the way invoices are structured, or let's say the amount of unstructured data and the amount of let's say problems in the invoice management and lifecycle management is quite large, and that's why these companies also tend to be very big in terms of the staff that they have to have, the amount of manual work that exists in invoice handling. The role of an AI agent in this case is actually quite clear. You're able to optimize a lot of those processes moving forward. So specifically what Buzzware has said is that they're going to deploy AI agents in the invoice management flow, and they're going to basically make sure that their people who are working on these invoices have like this co-pilot to assist them with invoices, also providing capabilities to make queries around different invoicer or billers and their money flows in natural language, kind of creating this new type of interface like we discussed in the beginning. The one interesting bit, of course, as we're talking about financial services, is that, well, what about the hallucinations? The large language models that these are based on typically are not that reliable when it comes to management of kind of very clearly defined processes. And what Buzzware has done is that they have implemented a centralized policy engine, which will define these guardrails so that whatever is the policies and processes defined by the organization, they are applied, and there are quote unquote no mistakes being made, at least on the financial front. So the agent won't be paying an invoice fake invoices of 5 million to Nigeria, for example, by accident. So the centralized model of having this kind of a leash on the agents is one way of complying. Remains to be seen how efficient that is. But again, at least that's one approach to do it. But yeah, I'm maybe a few comments more. But before we go there, Paul, what did you think about this another AI agent story from the world of invoicing?
Like you said, I can see an awful lot of value here and a lot of benefit. I can absolutely understand why you would want to use AI agents to help you with invoice management, even just to be able to create the audit trail for later on when you as a large corporation get audited by any of the large auditing companies, where you have to pull everything back out again and prove the lineage from invoice to approval to payment, etc. So I can see great value here. I agree with you that hallucination probably would be a big enemy in this, because it's dealing with financial facts across the board. But I'm actually a fairly heavy user of the services from Buzzware. So I, for one, would really appreciate some of the potential benefits that AI could bring here. One of the things that I was actually thinking about, which is sort of related to this and potentially much wider scope, Buzzware also for large corporates will do the whole expense management process as well. So if you as an employee, if the company you work for has their corporate card connected with Buzzware, then the invoice from the corporate card actually goes to Buzzware, and the whole process associated with your expense management is done through Buzzware. And I was just thinking from we're talking about embedded finance, we're talking about agents to agents, we're talking about all of these things. One thing that I think would be fantastic is if you could find a way of connecting all of this together. Back to your wine experiment there, Ville, it would be great if you could have agents that would actually automatically look at your credit card bill for your corporate card, go out somehow and collect those transactions from the vendors, pull the information back, and actually pull your whole expense report together for you. That would be a beautiful future. In actual fact, I think there is a fintech example that is embedded finance taken to the extreme level, pulled into your corporate systems as well. That would be great. That, I think, sounds good.
Yeah, that does sound good. Janne, are you a Buzzware user? Would you like to have AI agents with your expenses?
Well, I'm not a Buzzware user, but yeah, definitely. It's the time of the year when my account keeps on asking for the missing receipts. And that's always a pain in the ass. But generally, I think when it comes to AI agents, the barrier nowadays to enter and start doing is of course quite low. It's easy. But then again, when you talk about, like Paul mentioned, we talk about financial services, there's really not room for error. And most likely someone will do something stupid at this point. But then when we talk about Buzzware, that's a fintech company who's been around for 40 years. I believe they can take this stuff seriously and know what it is to do automation in financial services and not do any hallucinations and stuff like that.
Yeah. This you mentioned automation, and this brings me always to think about the robotic process automation trend that we've been witnessing now for quite some time. RPA, for those who might not remember, was a big hype before generative AI became like the mainstream topic to talk about around AI. RPA basically are scripts, very clearly defined scripts that automate handling of human user interfaces. So instead of building APIs, for example, for your legacy service, you would put this robot to click on your behalf through all the flows. And those kind of RPA tools became a big thing in the large corporate space, because there's a lot of user interfaces to navigate. There's a lot of kind of processes that you have to go through multiple user interfaces to do. and RPA became like this layer on top. Of course, RPA wasn't perfect, quite far from it. So for example, if a single element changed in the user interface, the RPA process broke. The RPA conducting also is a very proprietary tool, so you need to know the RPA process on how to actually orchestrate all of that. I believe that this agentic AI and LLMs to a certain extent is kind of an evolution from the RPA, especially in context of financial services. Because if RPA was very opaque and difficult to manage for average user, the LLMs and agentic AI makes it possible for anybody to create those RPA processes with natural language. So again, this conducting part becomes much more easier to do. And it's still able to rely on the same mechanics of RPA in the background, but again, making it much more scalable. The controls, of course, are still going to be interesting on how to actually implement those. But I think creating this easier access is going to make it much easier for companies to manage their invoices through Buzzware or otherwise. So again, interesting times, and another example of how AI is really feels like it's becoming more real every day. But good, as we promised, it's going to be a bit of a shorter episode today, so no more rambles, at least from my side. Any final words, Paul, before we wrap it up?
No, we promised no more rambles.
That's very short and to the point. Janne, any final words?
Yes, of course, a reminder to our viewers. So Nordic Fintech highlights and some of the companies that we have in the February recap and what we have discussed today will be also joining on stage. So May 21st in Helsinki, Pål and Ville will be also on stage, and we have the entire Nordic Fintech ecosystem there. So I hope that as many of the viewers as possible would also join us. And remember to also follow the future episodes on LinkedIn and YouTube and Spotify or wherever you watch, and also subscribe to the newsletter.
And Paul, I think we need to continue practicing our karaoke a little bit. The last performance was not fantastically reviewed, I heard, but I think by May we should be in good shape, right?
Ain't nothing but a stable coin. That's all I've got to say. Ain't nothing but a stable coin.
Ain't nothing but a mistake. Oh, anyway, we digress again. Okay, good. But thank you for listening all the way through. Again, this has been Nordic Fintech Highlights. Next time around, we will have another fantastic guest to join us, but it was always good to catch up with the news as well. As always, like, subscribe, leave a comment, refer us to your friend, your colleague, to kind of grow the family of FinTech Daydreaming. We thoroughly enjoy all the communications from the fans and listeners around the world we always get. And by the way, if you are watching us on Google, YouTube more specifically, there is a notification button there. So if you turn on the notifications in addition to subscribe to the channel, that makes it easier for other people to find as well in the future. So free tip for you there. With that being said, no more rambles. We will log off, and this has been FinTech Daydreaming.
This is FinTech Daydreaming.